The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Code Darms Paints, and Miniature War Games with Battle Games magazine, and also by the generous donations of you, the listener. Thanks to everybody for their continued support. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 123. Guild Ball, with guests Matt Hart and Richard Loxham. This podcast was recorded on the 11th of March 2014. Hello and welcome to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. I'm your host, Neil Shuck. On today's show, we're going to be talking with game designers Matt Hart and Richard Loxham about their game Guild Ball. Now, Guild Ball is a new sports game which, at time of recording, is in the middle of a very successful Kickstarter project. Normally when you start talking about wargaming and board games and sports games, immediately you get the spectres of things like Blood Bowl springing to mind. Obviously, more recently, Dreadball. Well, Guild Ball is a little bit different. Whilst it's a kind of fantasy medieval setting, certainly at this point in time, all the protagonists are very much human. Also, unlike a lot of sports games, it's not a board game. The game takes place on what would be familiar to most people as a war games table, so free-form movement. And rather than a version of American football or a cross between ice hockey and handball, Guild Ball is very much based on football, or I suppose as non-Brits would have it, soccer. Now, as I said, there's a very successful Kickstarter project currently on the go. The game is well overfunded. I think it had a funding level of £30,000, and at time of recording we're at something like £65,000. So first off, we're looking at a game that is definitely going to get produced. Secondly, it's a game where beta rules are already available and free to download, and I certainly think they're really, really interesting. They include a lot of the sort of mechanics that I really enjoy playing, and from my first impressions, the gameplay seems quite fast and dynamic, and also just the sheer look of the game I think has quite a unique look and feel and graphic design to it. So that's one reason why I was especially excited to talk to Matt and Richard about Guild Ball. So I got a chance to sit down actually with both of them on a Skype call, which was a surprise, as I was just expecting to have Matt and got Richard along as a bonus, and we got to chat for about 45 minutes. So we'll take a quick break, and when we come back I'll be chatting to Matt Hart and Richard Loxham all about Guild Ball.
I must get through to Sergeant Watson's position. Jenkins, cover me.
Sir.
Whoa. Sergeant Watson, bring your men in. Withdraw.
It's all right, sir. We're enjoying ourselves.
What?
Yes, sir. It's these here chain of command rules, sir. We're having great fun.
Chain of command?
That's right, sir. It's a challenging but fun blend of command and control. It gives me the freedom I want to fight the way I want to. Never had so much fun, sir. And we've cooked you some sausages. Can't be helped, sir. Me and the lads are staying put. Chain of command, World War II, platoon level rules from two fat lardies. They really put you in control. And they're even better than sausages.
I'm very pleased to welcome to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast Matt Hart and Richard Loxham, who are the guys behind Guild Ball. Welcome to the show, both.
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you both on. And obviously we're here to talk about a game that you currently have a Kickstarter going on at the moment for, which is Guild Ball. Before we get into that, one thing we do when we get new guests on the show is to ask them about their gaming background. I understand you actually come from quite different backgrounds as far as gaming is concerned. So who'd like to go first?
I'll let Rich go first.
He always does.
I know.
Okay, so yeah, so my background, I come from a very competitive background. I played Hordes and War Machine at quite a high level. I was ranked number 1 in the UK. I was the first UK hardcore champion, and then kind of went into organising tournaments. I organised the European Team Championships. I was one of the first people to start up the SmugCon over here, and kind of everything's developed from there. Really, I built a really nice kind of community and kind of met Matt through kind of gaming and on that side, but he was on the other side of the spectrum, really. In kind of personal life as well, I'm a digital designer and a teacher for like 7 years, so I kind of that's kind of my background, and that's kind of why it's kind of a good mix with Matt's background, which I'm sure I'll tell you in a second.
Yeah, so my background is certainly not as grounded in tournament play, although I do like playing in the occasional tournament, but I'm a project manager by trade, and I specialise in developing creative products, ostensibly video games, for the last decade or more. So I've run development teams of 130 people, developing games like Heavenly Sword, Enslaved, Devil May Cry, Remember Me, things like that. So I'm well versed in creative industries and endeavours.
But from that side of things, you know, quite opposite ends of the gaming gaming spectrum, yeah. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, I've not actually been heavily involved in tournament. I tend to focus much more on the hobby side. I absolutely love painting. I like painting in competitions, and I've managed to win a couple of trophies along the way. But I do, I enjoy playing as well. I think the thing that I find more fascinating than anything else is understanding the design principles and just literally the way a game hangs together and how it creates a user experience. That's the thing that really turns me on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like we're in quite esteemed company.
Oh, thank you. That's the first time that's ever been said.
It's true.
Well, as I say, it's great to have you both on. This evening we're going to be talking about Guild Ball, which is a Kickstarter you've had on the go for a couple of weeks. And first off, congratulations on getting funded, and well more than funded where we are at the moment. First off, let's go right back and have a look at some of the origins of where Guild Ball has come from. And first question is, why a sports game?
It came from it was actually SmugCon last year, and Rich and I were sitting there. There was a big group of us. We were just sitting there, just chewing the fat. And I was just watching, at the corner of my eye, a few of the games of War Machine that were just playing out, from a tournament that's going on near us. And it just, at the time we were playing a lot of, I don't know if that's my phone. We were playing a lot of Blood Bowl actually on Steam, and I just kind of said, I wonder if you could come up with a game where you could use Blood Bowl minis, but as a tabletop game, as a war game. And then we, sort of had a chat about it and drunk another few beers, and something about the idea just stuck. And Rich and I just carried on talking about it. And over, a couple of months, we basically developed the idea of Guild Ball between us. So
you could potentially see some of the influence with something like Blood Bowl, for example. The other obviously thing with most sports games is that they tend to be very much kind of board games as opposed to a free-form arena, which is where Guild Ball's coming from. Why did you decide to go down that route as opposed to, I suppose, a more traditional kind of board, if you like?
I think very early on when we started kind of working out Guild Ball, I mean, our backgrounds is kind of more in the tabletop arena. And the principle of kind of thinking, well, you know, we love these kind of games that are on boards and that, like Blood Bowl, etc. But imagine what they could be if they're on a freebie free. What extra plays and what abilities and what placement of, you know, movements and what else you could do and the flexibility of that. So that was one of the first things we did, which is literally, you know, scrap the board kind of systems and literally straight away looked at the tabletop and the freebie free area. We tried 2v2, 3v3, 4v4 and found a place that fit for where we were going, and it just allowed this incredibly flexible game, and it really kind of, you know, resonated, and I think it sets our product apart from a lot that's out there. Like I'm quite confident to say no other sports game works on this style of tabletop like this.
No, honestly, I wasn't aware of one, which is, you know, it kind of immediately makes the game stand out. I kind of got the impression from, you know, obviously the first time you look at it, it seems to be five-a-side football with added axes.
Pretty much. It's someone described it as, and this probably won't translate across the Atlantic, but it's Subutio with axes.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
And we all love Subutio.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, very much. Games from our own childhood, isn't it? So we had this idea for making a free-form sports game. So how did Guild Ball develop?
Well, one of the things that I bring with my background is understanding of the importance of having a strong silhouette, and by that I mean a visual identity for your artwork, for your game world, and for your models. And one of the things that we were keen to do, and that we enjoyed from games like Blood Bowl, was that team identity. So we needed to combine those together. So I don't quite know exactly where the idea came from, but it just evolved that, you know, what if you know, the teams were actually sponsored by someone, but in a fantasy world, what if they all dressed the same way, but, you know, it kind of grounded it in the world, and just this idea. And I mean, I think I was reading a bunch of Terry Pratchett at the time. There was a lot of guilds in Morpork, and it just sort of said, well, what if it was a guild that sponsored it? And then we started to create the background as to why this would have come about, and how the game of Guild Ball was born.
You were reading Unseen Academicals, weren't you?
Maybe. Absolutely, yeah. No, I just love. I've always enjoyed that kind of guild feeling. I guess when I was playing D&D, I used to always enjoy playing thieves and getting involved with the Thieves Guild, and I don't know. I just like this kind of collective, you know, sort of common attribute. And I think the other thing that really, the other real huge influence on us visually was Gangs of New York, especially the opening sort of 20 minutes. It was certainly something that stuck with both of us when we watched it, and we started talking about this game. We both kind of said, "Oh yeah, Gangs of New York is perfect." You know, that's kind of the feeling we want to get.
Okay, so given the fact that it's based in a fantasy realm, and yet you're marrying in aspects of the origins of football, why didn't you go the whole hog and put it in a completely fantasy world, complete with orcs, goblins, dwarves, etc.?
I think, I mean, early on we kind of, again, we wanted to look at this product and think, you know, we've in the world of miniatures, I mean, fantasy and, you know, sci-fi, there's a huge range, and they've all got the place, but we felt that there was a slight gap there of people doing kind of games that are in that kind of pseudo-realistic, you know, that a touch of the steampunk, but not too much, and a bit of the real kind of feel about it.
Yeah.
And I think by kind of ground it in the real, like with the guilds, the Butchers Guild, the Fishermen, I think it's allowed people to kind of feel an association with the teams, and a lot more than you would with the kind of fantasy teams. I mean, people obviously love, you know, your orcs and stuff, and our teams kind of play like some of them. The Butchers, for instance, are kind of very parallel with an orc team with the Bashi Bashi. But I think being humans in that, and the little twist we've done with the big guys and the little mascots, etc., we've got enough kind of whimsy about them to make them interesting, yet they're still real and they feel real. The world really does kind of stand out, and I think that was one big thing we tried to do. Definitely, you know, Game of Thrones is a huge influence on kind of that feeling of reality and just tying things down.
I mean, the other thing to think about is, you know, in our world, we have so many sizes and shapes and colours and creeds and flavours of people that, you know, you really don't need that racial diversity, for, you know, to go orcs, goblins, trolls, and ogres. And we knew that there was going to be, whilst we knew that our game had a huge delta from Blood Bowl and Dread Bowl and stuff like that, we knew that there would be bound to be comparisons, and so we wanted to ensure that our game felt unique. And we go back to that silhouette again. Guild Ball is a unique game experience. You know, it's like no other game out on the market at this moment in time.
Mm. How did you start coming up with the game mechanics and the background and the way the whole thing hangs together? And how long has that kind of taken to gel into what we see at the moment?
Well, we've been working on the core game for 12 months or more. It took us probably about 6 months before we'd nailed the core mechanics. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do, and I guess I was the most vocal, but, you know, this is where Rich and I work so well together, is we have, you know, very, very similar feelings on you know, sort of gameplay and design. But I just get fed up with tired old games using the same kinds of mechanics and not really looking at how the game is constructed and why it's constructed in certain ways. And there seems to be, you know, an awful lot of games that I love and still play, but there just seems to be rules in there that are redundant or pointless or just added for the sake of added complexity. And so we wanted to adopt a very stripped back, very fast, lightning fast. I could literally teach you to play the game in 2 minutes or less. And we've seen proof of that, where I did a quick demo and then got called away to go and give a presentation at a recent convention. And when I came back, the guys were still playing it, having an absolute whale of a time. And yet still the game has huge depth and longevity, and you know, you finish the game and you instantly want to play again. So you know, it all sounds like a perfect storm, but of design. Of course, every game wants that, but to do it, we broke everything down to its barest component parts. And I find it quite funny. We published a huge article. It's quite nerdy, but we spent so long talking about the core dice mechanic and why it's important, and how little people actually consider the importance of a dice mechanic is, and you know, the player interactions and the computations you need to make and the exchanges, you know, and the handshaking you need to do with your opponent, just for a simple thing like rolling an attack roll, comparing it to a defense, rolling a damage roll, comparing it to armor, deducting it, that's your net damage. It's just a really complex kind of transaction. So I wrote this massive essay about why we ended up with a simple dice pool system, and I did read on a forum somewhere when, yeah, this dude's just written like 2 sides of A4 about a dice pool system. But I think you've got to do that to understand how to make your game tick, you know. So I've done it again. I'll carry on talking about it. I love it.
I think the amount of time, and we literally did spend a couple of months on the core dices, you know, how that actually worked itself. And it might sound sad, but I think we are definitely seeing the benefits of that now, because people are saying this, you know, this game is absolutely simple to pick up, and yet instantly they can start seeing, once they're through that first turn, the depth that's put there with the abilities and the interaction with the models, and that's the hook, and that's what's people getting it, want to play more, because it's so easy to learn, yet it's, you know, the old saying, so, you know, hard to master.
It took you about 6 months to kind of get everything together. How have things progressed since then, and how has the game changed during playtesting?
We've had quite a few changes in the playtesting. I mean, in the early days, through the playtesting, we realised what was going wrong and we needed, for instance, to give an example of the movement, we had that as a kind of general one stat to start with, and it was split into 2 now, a move and a sprint. And part of the reason for that was to basically, if you increase the movement of a model, all of a sudden they could run 22 inches down the board and have a shot at goal. But by adding 2 stats in there, it allowed us much more flexibility in that design. Mm-hmm. And I think the whole game has kind of just naturally progressed, and as we tweak teams, I mean, the Butcher and Fisherman are 2 good examples of how we've created this really nice balance of, you know, 2 completely different styles of play. A Butcher's team, which goes in your face, it looks to destroy the opponent. Yet you've got the Fisherman team, which is all about movement and movement synergy, and kind of spreading themselves out and going for the goals. Yet you play either team and you've got an absolute fighting chance to win. There's no bias, and you know, and I think it's been a real kind of natural kind of progression really in the game, and then we've had the other teams in. It's just slowly kind of built up and got to where it is now really.
can we just examine some of the core mechanics? First off, it's effectively alternate model activation, and we're currently looking at also using model actions, aren't we?
Yes, yeah. So very much in the Malifaux mold, where it's single model asynchronous activation.
Mm-hmm.
The core mechanics, there's two basically. One is about how to kick someone, and the other one's about how to kick the ball. Right. So the core mechanic of kicking someone, we use a stat called tactical, which basically you use for any kind of action of this nature, and that is a number generally between 1 and 10, and that's essentially your dice pool. To which so you gather that number of d6s. We pick d6s because they're most naturally recognisable by us as human beings. They're the dice that we have spent more time with than any other shape of dice throughout our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. And basically you add to that any bonuses that are applicable. So if you charge, you add 2 dice. If your opponent's knocked down, you add 2 dice. If you've got any buffs or debuffs, then you just expand or contract your dice pool accordingly. And then you ask your opponent, what's your defense and armor? And defense is simply the target number that you need to roll. So it's either 2+, 3+, 4+, or 5+, or even 6+ if you're attacking someone that's got some defensive buffs. And you roll your dice pool, and every number that shows your opponent's defense or higher is simply a hit. And from that you deduct his armor value, which is generally a number between 1 and 3 or maybe 4, and that gives you your net hits. So very simple to resolve. You have one transaction with your opponent. What's your def and armor? From that, you have no computation. There's no maths that you have to do. You roll the dice. You're looking at number recognition, and you can quickly divide those dice out. It's like playing 40k or Warhammer, and you roll 30 dice. You can very quickly identify all the ones that are 4 or more. It doesn't take that long at all. The complexity comes where you've generated a net number of hits. You then consult what we're calling a playbook, which is basically a number of columns of actual in-game options. So they might be things like doing damage, they might be knocking your opponent down, they might be tackling the ball, they might be pushing him, or dodging yourself out of combat, or triggering special abilities that we're calling plays. And essentially, the more hits you get, the more options you get to select from, and then you pick one result and apply it. So you can go into a combat, and the guy's got the ball, so you want to hit a tackle. The guy you're tackling with needs 3 hits to make a tackle. And you can kind of assess your likelihood. You roll your dice. If you get 3 hits or more, then you can tackle him. But you might get 5 or 6 hits and trigger a special play, and suddenly that opens up a new tactical choice for you. And you need to make a decision there and then on the spot. Do I still want the ball, or do I want to trigger this play? Could I then set something else up for later on in the turn? And what's fascinating is when we watch in playtests, the amount of people who don't just do raw damage. Guild Ball is a game that's entirely about positioning. Those war gamers that are able to position well and anticipate moves and put their models into the right places are going to be far more successful at playing the game. So, we're seeing a lot of people doing a lot of dodges and a lot of pushes, and it's a lot more about moving the ball into space and taking opportunities of space around the pitch. So that's me waffling on for a long time again.
Interesting on that, the playtest Matt was saying before about that when we walked away and come back, they were 2 of the best Malifaux players in the country at the moment. Right. And the end of that game, it was a 3-2 to the Fishermen. No models had died, and it really did highlight when I was watching it that the level of kind of position that these 2 players had naturally really shone through the game. So it was quite a nice example to see.
Interestingly, you've gone for the alternate activation as opposed to, I suppose, a more traditional I go, you go that we've seen an awful lot of in the past. Was there a particular reason why you chose the model that you have gone, as opposed to something that some people may be more familiar with?
Yeah, go on, Rich.
Yeah, so there definitely was. Part of the reason that we chose that system was because what can happen in some games is that if you're watching your opponent do lots of things and then move everything and shoot you, etc., it can become a very disengaging experience, and very quickly you can feel like you're not active in that role. And we were very quick to say, no, we want Guild Ball to be that constant back and forward interaction between players, interaction between, with the opponent you're playing with. So the asynchronous activations is really important to that. Yeah. Not only that, we built a momentum system on top of that, which allows people to use momentum and basically counterplay in a way, so actually interrupt abilities or movements the opponent's doing. Yeah. So it adds that interaction that a lot of games are missing, we feel.
Yeah, counterplay is a key design principle that it's one of our core columns. And the idea of counterplay is that you should always have an opportunity to counterplay one of your opponent's tactics if you can anticipate and your positioning is good enough. So, one of the things we found with War Machine is very often you could find yourself in a situation where you're watching your opponent literally just carry out his assassination run and you can do nothing about it, and it can be quite a dry experience. So we wanted to make sure that it's more a game of bluff. There's a meta game there where you're playing against the man as well as against the models, and so the asynchronous thing was entirely natural in that regard.
Yeah. As you say, it makes sure that both players are involved at all times, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. We've talked a bit about the rules mechanics and looking at the way some of the things play. I mean, as I was reading through the rules, I was kind of spotting bits where, especially with, you could see where like there were some War Machine influences and a couple of other bits and pieces in the way a couple of things were done, and then some stuff that was brought in separately. Playing through that gives a really nice experience, and I must admit, I do like the feel of dice pool and not having to constantly think about, hang on a second, I'm rolling all this dice, but I've got to think about all the modifiers I've got to add to them. Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of one roll with a target number. So that immediately leapt out as a like for me. It has to be said.
Well, that was more of my weakness because like I say, I play in tournament plays, and Rich is far more experienced than I am, but the thing that I hated the most was in a tournament under the pressure of, especially time turns, of making a maths mistake. And it's a genuine error. And yet you feel like you're cheating, where you kind of go, yeah, that plus that minus that that's 11. And they're like, oh, actually, that's a 10. And you're like, oh, God, I feel really bad now. So it was a selfish thing. I wanted to get away from maths as much as I could.
Okay, so we covered the mechanics a bit. Of course, that's only part of Guild Ball. One of the other major components are the models themselves, and it has to be said, from what we've seen already, they look absolutely gorgeous. Can you tell me a bit more about those, please?
Yeah, so we're working with Russ Charles, who I like to describe him as an up and coming animation star in the UK. He's highly sought after. He's working for all the names that you would recognise in the UK and beyond. I think his crowning achievement recently was the work that he did for Privateer Press for a circle caster.
Falconer.
Yeah, which is absolutely phenomenal sculpt. Now, he has been developing a digital pipeline that we worked with him to finalise. I mean, he did all the heavy lifting, if truth be told. But he's working on this digital pipeline that gives us amazing results with the flexibility and speed of a digital pipeline. So we don't have the constraints that you would expect from a traditional green sculpting process. Enables us to do fast turnaround, enables us to perhaps achieve more dynamic poses than are possible, certainly enables us to have feedback cycles that you wouldn't ordinarily get without spending a huge amount of money. So it's given us the ability to work really closely with Russ, develop a feedback mechanism that's generated the ability to create these phenomenal models. On top of that, Rich and I and Russ all have a very good eye for what it looks like, what's a cool look in a model, and so we're working together to really push the boundaries of how we can make our models look the best that they possibly can be.
We've talked about the fact that the whole background of Guild Ball is to do with the guilds themselves. And how did you come up with the ideas for all these guild teams?
Go on, Rich, you dive in. That's a really easy one to answer.
I mean, we just started by kind of looking at kind of the the types of armies that people always associate and the types of play styles people associate. Now, we wanted 4 core kind of styles for that. Now, we wanted a bashy team. We wanted someone that beat the face in. We wanted a team that had lots of movement tricks and could move around the ball and be fast. And we wanted a team that would kind of do synergy and work well together and kind of support each other. And we also wanted a team that was kind of not negative play, but would affect the enemy team and kind of manipulate and stop them.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, if we talk about it, you're thinking like your orcs, your undead, your elves, and your humans, effectively.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then we kind of looked then from about how these fit in. So obviously your bashy team, what kind of in real life in the guilds and that, what would fit in there. And the butchers just naturally sprung up. Like, they cut meat, and why not cut people? It kind of makes sense. And then obviously the fishermen, they're going to be agile and the ropes and stuff, and it all fits in there. The morticians, again, they jumped out to us again for the undeady kind of approach and the manipulation, a bit puppet string, a bit devious and sinister. And then the masons, the kind of inverted commas good guys of the situation, and the real kind of upstanding, building the stone colosseums and stuff, and hard working, and it kind of just fit together really. The 4 kind of just leapt out to us.
I mean, the other thing about the game, that this is the thing as a game designer that excites me as much as anything else, which is you can talk to anyone. And like over the last couple of weeks, we've talked to thousands of people, and everyone's got an idea for a guild, and it's an instant grab. You could literally say the name of a guild now, and between us, within 5-10 minutes, we'd have brainstormed 20 different ideas of how that guild could play, how it could look like, what kind of models there should be in there, everything. And for me, that signifies that you've got a really strong core concept for a game or for a game world that it is really powerful.
Yeah, because the one thing as well as very stands out is that the visual design behind the game is very striking in itself, isn't it?
Yes, we work well with a contact that I've worked with for a long time, a guy called Doug Telford, who worked on Heavenly Sword. He's worked on Killzone. He's worked on a whole bunch of other stuff for Sony and Disney, and we spent an awful lot of time with him just developing the visual look of the world. We wanted that kind of instant grab appeal of like a graphic kind of feeling to it, but also wanted to keep the visual, the grittiness, the reality that exists within the world. Yes,
yeah. Obviously, from a Kickstarter point of view, we're now looking at the fact that the game has over double funded.
Yes.
And we've seen the first extra guild in Brewers Guild, and we're also looking at what I take to be a mercenary faction with the Union. Would you be asking too much to kind of tease us with what we're likely to see in the next couple of weeks?
So, how did you give it away? You can guarantee that, I think it's the worst kept secret of all, that you can guarantee that the Alchemist Guild is going to be coming. So the art brief, the artist literature is currently finalising that. We've seen some of the initial stuff, and they are incredible. So I think people are going to go crazy for them. That's kind of the first protocol. But obviously, Doug and our other artists, they're not just sat there twiddling the thumbs. So we can't give too much away, but let's put it this way. Going into the last week, especially this week, is kind of, we're focusing a little bit on the tournament play, the league play, and look at the retail packages, and doing the big push this week for the Guild Insider package, which people are going for a reduced rate this week to get basically everything from the Kickstarter. But going into the last week, we have got a stacked week basically, that you're going to see quite a lot of good stuff and things that are going to come out left wing that people may not have expected. We've had the tags, but people appreciate that it's just me and Matt doing this, and and it's a lot of work that we've had to do. But we during that work we have worked solid to get as much as we can through during the Kickstarter and give the audience exactly what they want. So yeah, it's going to be a nice last week, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Okay, well, especially with the amount of competition background that you've got, Richard, I mean, it's quite obvious that one of the things behind Guild Ball is that it's aimed at tournament play. What sort of ideas have you got for that in the future?
Sure. So we've already started contacting several of the, especially UK-based ones, but we've started contacting the 5-star games down south. We've started in Wales. We've talked. It's down south in Wales. People are shouting at me now. In Wales, and we've contacted Tabletop Nation down south as well. The North West Gaming Centre up in the north, and we're basically going to be building a structure in the UK to start with, and obviously expanding out because we've got a few contacts via the Kickstarter, etc. That are going to help us with that to create a kind of effectively an international competitive scene. That's a massive passion of mine. I've got a big history in kind of event organisation. The game, as you said, has had that element in it from everything we've done, and it's kind of in the background. The game plays in a Death Clock environment, and you will definitely see this game being played in tournaments at a high level throughout the country and throughout the world. Really, it's crazy to say that. It's still slightly surreal that the pickup for this game is literally global. We thought mainly it'd be UK and Europe based because it's based around football, but a massive majority of people from the US, from Malaysia, from Japan, literally everywhere is picking this game up, which is it's still slightly shocking when you stand back, but it has got a global appeal, and we are more than committed to supporting that.
Well, as long as they're not all Man United fans, I suppose we'll let them off.
Yeah, I'm a City fan, so that's can't be doing with United fans.
Right. From a nuts and bolts point of view, we're looking for delivery on this Kickstarter for December of this year, yeah?
That's what we're saying. I'm fully confident that we're going to deliver early.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be bold and say we're going to deliver earlier than that, but we're saying December because that gives us a little bit of wriggle room if things don't quite go as well as we can. But, we have gone into this Kickstarter with a very carefully laid out plan. We've known pretty much at every turn exactly what we're going to do and how we want to play it, and so far it's working, exactly as we wanted it to, and exactly as we hoped it would do and we planned for. The speed at which it's moved has been alarming, but perhaps testament to our kind of planning. But we've got a fully fledged out production plan. Our pipelines are all in place. We've got distribution deals already in place with the right people to one, support actual distribution of the Kickstarter product, but also two, to then support the ongoing retail development of this game. The thing that funding so fast has enabled us to do is to have serious conversations with people. This is a game that's now real. It's not a 25,000-30,000 game where we've just scraped over the line and you might see it in a couple of shops hidden in a dusty corner. It's a game that a lot of people have heard about now, and when they start seeing it appear in shops and as people start playing it, we've got huge ideas for where we could take this franchise. It's such a cool world. We talked to people like Modifius about we're going to do the role-playing game for this game a little bit later on in the year. Yeah, and there will be something else that comes out at the same sort of time as the role-playing game that would be quite synergistic. Let's just say
that's true.
Yeah. Well, as you say, especially with the world and everything else, it lends itself into that sort of thing. I mean, given the fact that you've got I suppose, part of a ready built combat system anyway, are you potentially looking at taking this to a point where you're doing a full skirmish war game and forgetting about the football entirely?
All things are possible under this great blue sky that God created for us. Potentially, yeah. I mean, the world in which Guild Ball is set is a world full of conflict, and whilst Guild Ball can be played out on the pitch, it can be played in the streets, it can be played, it's a throwdown game between a group of, rival factions. It's also a massive game in front of baying crowds of 80,000 people. But there's also room for, like you say, more skirmish level, maybe even larger, who knows? The only thing that I definitely will say is whatever we decide to go down in terms of game size and game type, we will design specifically for that. So one of the things I feel quite strongly about. I know Rich feels the same way. Is games that perhaps started off as perhaps a smaller scale game, and then over the years have just grown and grown and grown, and in the end, the rule system almost doesn't quite support its own weight now. And you know, and I can think of a number of examples. You know, the obvious one with Rich and I's background screams itself, but there's huge numbers of games that are like that. That, you know, I find it a little bit sad. You know, that the great games feel the need to kind of expand beyond their own capabilities. So if we wanted to do an army scale game, then we would apply the same design rigor that we have done with Guild Ball, and we'll design an army scale game.
I mean, the good thing, you kind of touched on it, with the system we've built, it is a very modular system. We took that from the ground up, and the core there is adaptable for, you know, multiple situations. So yeah, you're very astute. you kind of picked up on maybe some of the future holds. Let's put it that way.
Right. Perhaps another Kickstarter for another day.
Maybe it's working out pretty good so far.
Well, yeah. I mean, did you have many doubts about how, you know, what the reception was going to be for the game? I mean, obviously, I mean, especially with the fact that you launched at a time when 3 sports games launched all at the same time.
That's us. We got big balls.
Yeah, I mean,
that's just the game.
We had, you know, we created this for a year. We'd already planned the window where it was going to release, and you know, when we knew the other two, you know, one was already on there. We knew the other one was coming around at the same time. We did feel our product was unique enough to attract people's attention, and the people that were looking at our models and our game system were a different audience than those that were after the other two. And I think that has shown, you know, not to say we weren't kind of, you know, when we launched, it was like, let's go, you know, if we can make $5,000 in the first weekend, we'll be really happy. And if we can, you know, trundle on to the 30K near the end, we'll be more than happy. But then when we made $10,000 in 10 minutes and the next day in 12 hours with $430,000, then, you know, it was a nice feeling that people are seeing this, and it's quite nice to see the comments that basically everyone's kind of joining in and going like, oh, I've just found this game, it's brilliant, you know, I've just found it, you know, I've play tested it, you know, and it's starting to get out there, you know, our exposure, you know, we don't have the huge kind of, you know, mass, you know, media budget. It is just me and Matt, you know, and, you know, literally an indie development team producing a game, you know, and I think it's getting the word out, and people spreading the information about it is starting to get there, and people are seeing the quality we put out. I mean, we've had several people say about the fact that the quality of this game, the quality of the miniatures, the quality of the artwork is top notch production, you know, and it's a real, you know, it's really nice to hear, you know, the people have said like, this is their first game, what else can they do, you know, and, you know, after this Kickstarter, we are going to have a working capital and a working budget that is you know, much bigger than Guild Ball's starting one. So the future's bright, should we say?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly fair, from my impression, I mean, yeah, you two are so well. You're a couple of guys as an indie company, and yet you look at what you've produced. You look at the way you've hit the market. You know, with all the multimedia stuff that you're doing, with things like your online TV stuff, and it seems that several companies, you know, struggle to get through the whole multimedia thing. Oh, at some point we'll get a gameplay video out. At some point, you know, we'll try and get some you know, fully rendered 3D sculpts available for you to see. And it seems like you've got to a point where you've been there and done it immediately. So at the point where you're bringing your product to market, everything that people would expect to see is already available. And I think that's made, you know, from my point of view, I think that's made a huge difference just in the availability of everything's there. And you're kind of saying, well, actually, you know, these guys are not making up as they go along. You know, they really do have a plan and a vision for what's happening. And I think that's made a huge difference. And, yeah, it certainly gives a tremendous impression about the whole project.
Thank you.
No, Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it might look like a swan on the outside, but underneath we're furiously paddling and working pretty hard to try and make it happen. So it's nice to hear. I mean, I don't know, you know, the social media is just the most accessible way for people like Rich and I to get in touch with a huge number of people, and it gathers its own momentum, and as people buy into what you're doing and they get excited about it, they pull more and more people in. It's just a phenomenal development in mankind's history, and why wouldn't we use it? I think people are insane if they don't have a healthy multimedia plan and social media plan of how they're going to share the news about what they're doing.
Okay, so if people want to know more about Guild Ball, how do they get a hold of you, and what do they need to do to find out more information?
Sure. So our main website, guildball.com, has got all the links off to our Twitter, which is @guildball, our Facebook, which is facebook.com/guildball, our Kickstarter, which is a huge URL, so I'm not copying that one. But basically, if you search on Kickstarter for Guild Ball, you type Guild Ball into Google, we're pretty much everywhere. Twitch TV /Guild Ball, youtube.com/Steamforge, which is kind of our origins. But all the links are from our website. You can go on there, you can check it out. You've got straight to the Kickstarter link. And just please, even if you've got no interest in sports games and you kind of like, no interest in, just have a look at the stuff we've done. It's really appreciated just to have a look at it, and you never know, you might see something there that you like. We've had quite a few people say never been interested in sports games, or the like in the past, but I've seen the concept you guys have put out, seen the kind of approach you've done, and this is for me, and just download the free playtest rules, have a game of it, make the paper dolls. We've thrown it out there free for people to try to play, and another good point is that the rules will always be free for this game. It's a free to play mentality me and Matt took. It's we made a conscious decision early on that we didn't want to charge people for rules books. We have printed a rule book. We didn't actually include it to start away, but there was a big demand for printed rule books because people still like the traditional approach. But the rules will be completely free after launch, after the field test, to download, and we want to keep that kind of approach really, and share the game. You can play it with our miniatures that we've spent a lot of time with, or you can proxy card miniatures. We really just want people to play the game more than anything, rather than worry about the finer details.
Yeah. So the Kickstarter's due to complete on the 22nd of March, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and once that deadline passes, what next as far as yourselves are concerned, and what next as far as people, getting hold of more information, and as far as playing the game is concerned?
Sure. So at the end of the Kickstarter, we will be launching the pretty soon afterwards. We're launching the forums, and we'll be launching the feedback forums specifically, and we'll also be starting the field test. The field test will go on for a few months, and that will cover basically, it'll be all the rules for the additional guilds that you've seen, all the balancing issues. People will be able to submit feedback and get involved in the development and the progression of these guilds, and every Kickstarter backer will have the opportunity to do that. From there, we're obviously in the background we're going to be producing the models and getting the renders done with Russ, and then going to production, and we'll also make sure we get a presence at as many shows as we can do. That's what we're literally looking at the moment to book ourselves in. And it's basically just build the presence all the way to the shipping day really, and keep the game flowing. Obviously we're working with Modiphius on the RPG, and that will surface during this time at some point. And just keep building it up to the initial retail launch, and then making sure we have that tournament support in play and the league play in there, and just get it all nicely flowing, and then support from there really. That's the plan.
Right. Well, Matt, Richard, it's been fantastic to speak to you. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
No, likewise. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and it has to be said, the more I hear about Guild Ball, the more impressed I become with it. Thank you for producing what looks to be a really nice game. All the very best with the rest of the Kickstarter, and all the very best with the project once Kickstarter's over. And I hope to, maybe we can touch base again a few months down the line and see how everything's going.
Oh yeah, I'd love that.
Sounds brilliant. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for being on the show, both.
No problem.
Cool. Speak soon. Cheers.
The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is very happy to be sponsored by Coat d'Arms Paints. Now, Coat d'Arms have been supporting miniatures painters with their products for well over 20 years in some way, shape or form. Their current range is 150 sets of acrylic paint, which are available both as individual colours, but also in paint sets depending on period. Things such as the Ancients paint set, the World War II German, World War II American, World War II Russian paint sets, and they also include things like an ACW set and even a Horsetown set. That's one way to purchase your paints. And they also do triads. Now, if you're a fan of the 3-colour system made famous by the likes of people like Kevin Dallimore, you may like to purchase your paints with a dark shade, a medium shade and a highlight. And the triad system from Coat d'Arms allows you to do this. They also have ranges of textured paints called Brushscape, which allow you to paint from textures onto bases as well as colour. And these are ideal especially for smaller scale models. And if you're a fan of the dip method of painting, then Coat d'Arms have their own product available called Super Shader. This is available in light brown, dark brown and black. Coat d'Arms Paints have a whole range of products available to try. Check them out at www.blackhat.co.uk and be sure to tell them that we sent you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I must admit, as I was chatting with Matt and Richard, I was getting more and more excited about the game. In a lot of ways, I've been somewhere on the fence with this one, especially with the fact that, I've been quite heavily invested in Dreadball. And, I was kind of asking the question of, do I really want another sports game? Yet, when I sat down and went through the beta rules that they have and got a chance to play a few turns, you can immediately see that the game is very different, especially with the fact that it's not it's not a board game. So in that sense alone, immediately you get much more freedom of movement and freedom of tactics. And whilst we certainly haven't seen everything, the beta rules don't include rules for terrain, for example, it gives a really good idea already of the sort of quick gameplay that is available. It is really easy to pick up, and yet there's an awful lot to do. As I hinted in the interview, you can certainly see where some of the influences come from. Especially when it comes down to the teams and the way that hit points work and various other bits and pieces, and also some of the special abilities. There are certainly some influences from the likes of War Machine there, other things taken from, as I said, things like Malifaux. Certainly, there's nothing that is particularly copied, and to be honest, a lot of the mechanics they are using are fast becoming almost industry standard for this style of skirmish game, whether it be a sports game or whether it be a simple skirmish warband game. And from some of the hints that have already been dropped, it will be really interesting to see what develops from the back of Guild Ball. As I say, there's obviously the RPG which Modifius are looking at, and this hint of some sort of battle game whose scale may or may not be around the same size as War Machine, I suspect. But certainly, if they work on similar sort of mechanics to what we've seen in Guild Ball so far, certainly from a gameplay experience point of view, I think they're looking at something that is pretty good. So given the fact that it's a fantasy sports game with a skirmish game sort of edge to it, the mechanics do come a little bit more to the fore, and you don't start thinking about whether the game reflects real combat in the same way as you would if it was an historical war game. So, you do start talking a lot more about game mechanics and the way the game feels. And as I said, with the alternate unit activation and especially the way the dice pools work, that is one of my favourite mechanics of recent years. I have become a huge fan of game mechanics that use the adding or taking away of dice with a fixed die result and a number of successes or failures when rolling, as opposed to either rolling one or multiple of dice and then having to add a multitude of modifiers. It's certainly a direction that an awful lot of game designers are taking these days. There's a reason behind that. It works really well and is really easy to learn. And I think it actually works better than the dice modifier sort of system. So from that side of things, the game ticks a lot of boxes for me. As I say, miniature design is really nice. You're looking at some of the masters that they produced so far, and they really are stunning. Obviously, Matt and Richard are positive about the game, but you can just see from what we've seen so far, both of some of the 3D renders that are going on, but also the results of that in resin and metal, that this really is a high-end quality product that they're producing. So it's definitely worth checking out. Obviously, we discussed all the contact information at the back end of the interview, and I'm really interested and quite excited to see where this is all going to go in the next year, 18 months. It's obvious that they put an awful lot of work into this so far, and they've already seen the fruits of that. As I say, you just look at not only just the fact that they have an online presence, but the quality of what they've done. There are a lot of startup companies that can learn a lot by looking at what they've done with Guild Ball. They really had a professional, integrated approach to the launch of the product, and it's very impressive. I mean, we talked about Matt and Richard's background, and especially with Matt being a project manager in real life. Then obviously that's going to come through in what he's done with this, and it certainly does shine. So I think this is really exciting. I think there's a lot available here, and be really interested to keep eyes on this and see what comes out of Guild Ball and what happens between now and the end of the year. Certainly a product and a company worth keeping an eye on. Well, that's about all we've got time for this show. Thank you once again for listening, and until next time, happy gaming, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you want to know more about Meeples and Miniatures, there are several things you can do. First of all, you can visit the website at www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. If you want to contact the show at all, you can email me at neil@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. You can follow the show on Twitter. Simply look for M&M Podcast, or click the follow us on Twitter button from the website. We also have a group on Facebook. That's the Meeples and Miniatures Podcast Fan Club. Again, follow the link from the website. And finally, if you want to help to support the show, you can always donate to the podcast by clicking the PayPal button on the donate page, again found on the website. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope you've really enjoyed the show. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.